my friends. Do I have quite the story for you? Not the kind of story that entertains our fascination with the supernatural, but the story that reflects a place much darker than the human imagination, that closet of skeletons that is kept within the back of our minds. Introduction: Kuriko, a kind-hearted woman and soon-to-be wife to a childhood friend Yutaro. This loving couple that you see before you are just a few weeks away from enjoying their lives as a married couple. But for Kuriko, she cannot participate this moment of happiness without sharing a confession, which is why Kuriko and Yutaro are spending their day at a location that brings nothing but horrid memories and shame for Kuriko. A playground, a place that had brought nothing but discomfort and sadness for the woman. Yutaro, who's understanding and a good listener, knows that marriage is quite an overwhelming moment in one's life. And even though he knows that Kuriko is about to share a story, a chapter within a darkened past that must be told before taking that big step with a clear state of mind, Yutaro, who's fully prepared to venture into Kuriko's closet of skeletons, confident enough that he would leave as the same man whose love for this woman will not be shaken nor changed. I've always believed that the greatest horror stories are not the ones that are spilt into books, shown through films, a mere expression of our fascination for the supernatural and the macabre, but the stories that are forbidden, kept within the deepest, darkest pits of our minds. Them stories that reflect ourselves as the true monsters that lurk within the shadows of humanity. Basically, Yutaro here is underestimating the true darkness of humanity and how deep it can go. Because by the end of Kuriko's darkened story, he will not leave this closet of skeletons as the same man. My friends, before we embark on this terrible journey, you are about to witness a horror that surpasses its entertainment value and show us how we humans are the true monsters that we all fear because of our expertise in human cruelty. Meaning, in other words, you're going to see things that are most likely going to make you feel very uncomfortable. So with that said, viewer discretion is advised. Enjoy the show. This playground, the very thing that brings Yutaro a lot of childhood memories, is a place that brought nothing but absolute horror for Kuriko. All this time and it still stands. God, how much she hated this playground. How she feared it. Back then, she would always be found standing on the side of the playground just watching Yutaro and his friends play, hoping that one day she would get the opportunity to play with them. Unfortunately, knowing how kids are, she was often teased by the boys, mostly because of how she was younger and a girl who secretly had a crush on Yutaro. It was like every time she visited the playground, just standing on the side, doing very little to nothing besides watching Yutaro and his friends play, just waiting for the day when she could join the boys and play. But one day, everything changed when a mother who lived near the park had noticed how Kuriko was usually by herself. Feeling bad for the lonely girl, that was when Kuriko was approached by this mother and her child, and given an unexpected request to play and be friends with her son, also offering her a chocolate bar. The boy's name was Nao, small, a couple years younger, and very, very shy. And even though Kuriko was slightly bothered by the fact that she was teased by Yutaro and his friends because of her new friend, which he really wasn't a friend, it's just temporarily. It wasn't long before Nao began warming up to Kuriko. In fact, Kuriko began noticing how the child was starting to become attached to her. The following days was when Nao started coming to the park by himself, with no mother. And it was because of Nao while Yutaro and his friends would leave the park and go somewhere else to play, too crowded with little children. Which is why Kuriko was starting to feel like Nao was nothing but a burden. And even though Kuriko tried explaining to Nao that she didn't have any interest playing with him, Nao was incredibly persistent, clingy, and annoying. And somewhere within Kuriko's mind, an inner hatred began brewing for the nagging child. One evening, after a long day of reluctantly playing with Nao, more like being stuck with the child, Kuriko did not expect that she would come home with her mother sharing an unexpected surprise. A box of sweets from Nao's mother. A gift, a special thanks for being friends with her son. And you would think that one could entice a child so easily with sweets. But after the days of tolerating a boy who she found to be obnoxious, and the very thing that was stopping her from having a chance to play with Yotaro, not even being rewarded with chocolate and boxes of sweets was enough to bring joy within Kuriko, nor tolerate a boy like Nao. And now with Kuriko's mother expressing her expectations of making sure that her daughter keeps playing with Nao every time she visits the park, that was when the inner hatred for the child began to grow, like a monster within Kuriko, trying to claw itself into the open world and inflict nothing but misery, pain, and unremitting horrors. Visiting the park just to see Yutaro had become an unbearable task for Kuriko when she felt obligated and aggravated on the fact that she was stuck with Nao. The way he would cling to her, the nagging, was unbearable, driving Kuriko to the point where she started despising Nao, developing an intense hatred for the boy. At first, all Kuriko wanted to do was find a way to be free from Nao, to give him a reason to leave her alone, which is why Kuriko began bullying the child, like screaming into Nao's ear, even pulling and yanking his ears to where the poor boy would go into a crying frenzy. And knowing that the pitiful cries would obviously attract his concerned mother, hopefully it was enough to convince Nao to leave her alone. But the following day, Kuriko was wrong. Nao kept coming back, that after the cruel act, he still wanted to play, pleading that Kuriko would be nice this time. So the boy was persistent, and didn't understand the fact that Kuriko did not want to play with him, that maybe screaming and pulling the ears was not enough for Nao to get the message. So seeing how it was a hot day, Kuriko reluctantly spent the afternoon playing with Nao. It was when they decided to drink from the water fountain. That was when Kuriko began reacting to them inner feelings, the compulsion to do something cruel. Instead of sharing the water, Kuriko decided to take Nao someplace better. Let Nao enjoy something that was more refreshing than water and suitable for a boy like Nao. Gutter water, just perfect for a nagging brat. And knowing that the boy would obviously be reluctant, Kuriko began pulling the child near the water, and with Nao struggling and fighting against Kuriko, it was like she was overwhelmed with the inner compulsion when forcing Nao's head into the water. The feelings of anger, the misery that this child would bring with whimpering and nagging, the fact that she was stuck with this brat who stopped her from wanting to be happy. Watching Nao squirm and kick because of how Kuriko deprived Nao from oxygen, sending the boy into a panic frenzy when Kuriko was done with the horrendous act, screaming with tears before Kuriko fled from the scene. It was at this moment, my friends, when an evil was truly born. Because there was something about watching Nao in a state of pain, in distress, suffering, Kuriko found to be satisfying. The following days had only grew darker. Every time Nao would return to the park, wanting to play with Kuriko, the attachment he had with the girl would only result with her entertaining these darkened thoughts, thrilled when getting the chance to act upon them. Kuriko was now at the point where she no longer wanted to play with Yutaro and his friends, but finding new and creative ways on tormenting Nao, such as beating the child viciously with a stick during a game of fencing. There was something about the crying, the screaming Kuriko found enlightening, and every time Nao would show up the following day wanting to play with his whimpering pleas, it felt like the boy was enjoying the abuse. Eventually one day, Kuriko's abuse had almost gotten her caught when she tried convincing Nao into jumping from the playground set. Knowing that the small boy would be at risk of hurting himself, it was when the pressure and fear resulted with his unbearable cries, attracting his concerned mother. Even though Kuriko played innocent when easily convincing Nao's mother that it was her son's idea of wanting to jump off the playground set, and she was just trying to stop him from doing something foolish. Watching Nao being carried away after being rewarded with another chocolate bar, that darkness within Kuriko began to grow to the point where she ended up having a sinister fascination with Nao. In other words, Kuriko was furious when Nao's mother stopped her campaign on tormenting the child. The next day, Nao didn't show up, but that did not stop Kuriko from pursuing her goals of finding new and innovative ways on tormenting the boy, which is why she decided to visit the house and ask if Nao could spend a day playing with her. This time, it was Nao who was reluctant, but was also pressured by his mother to go out and play. Feeling that her son needed to go out and make friends, and even though Nao never told his mother about the abuse, the marks, nor what truly happened on that day at the park, Kuriko knew that Nao was too afraid to tell his mother what was really happening. And yet, that did not stop Kuriko from entertaining the idea that the boy was lying, which is why she decided to test his loyalty. That day, my friends, when Kuriko forced Nao a few houses down from the park, visiting Devil, a local guard dog that has a violent reputation against trespassers. That was when the abuse had went too far, and Kuriko's sinister fascination on tormenting the child had reached its limits. To test his loyalty and friendship, Kuriko demanded that Nao walk into the yard and fetch the ball that she rolled near the dog. If Nao grabs the ball and returns safely, then he's innocent. If not, then he's obviously guilty. And knowing that Nao would be uncomfortable, once again clinging onto Kuriko because of how scared he was, it was within a split second before she pushed the boy into the yard, and her fascination of tormenting a child would immediately change into horror when witnessing a sight that would forever haunt her. To this day, Kuriko had never forgotten Nao's painful screams when running away from the grisly scene. Thankfully, Nao wasn't killed, but supposedly he did go to the hospital for severe injuries, and it was just a few days later after the incident before Nao and his mother moved out of town. Thankfully, Nao wasn't killed, but supposedly he did go to the hospital for severe injuries, and it was just a few days later after the incident before Nao and his mother moved out of town. So, Kuriko was a terrible child who had bullied and abused a young boy. Even though Yutaro understands why Kuriko felt the need to share her story, as anticipated, it wasn't enough to shake his love for Kuriko, nor change the way he views her. What happened to Nao was something that happened a long time ago. Even though Kuriko may have done some horrible things back then, and Yutaro strongly believes that it was the result of parenting gone wrong when both children were pressured into playing with each other, what happened in the past, and something that should be left in the past, and why it's best to move forward. Except, that's not the end of the story. You see, Kuriko can't truly move forward without sharing the epilogue to the story, when Kuriko ended up running into Nao. At first, Kuriko didn't recognize the handsome stranger within the suit and tie until he approached her and introduced himself as Now. Shocked when he presented himself as a longtime friend, with no maliciousness within his tone or demeanor, as if he had forgotten everything. So when he offered to take Kuriko somewhere for tea, explaining how his new job was the reason why he returned back to this place, after the years of guilt weighing down on Kuriko, the horrible memories of what she did to Now, and what she had witnessed on that terrible day, the fact that Now seemed completely unfazed, nor without any grudges, had given Kuriko a tremendous amount of relief and true comfort. The feeling around this man, who she had once abused and tormented, had quickly become a warming experience for the troubled woman. Even when they decided to visit the playground together, reliving the horrible experience was much different for Now. The way he talked about Kuriko abusing him as if he never took it seriously. In fact, he saw them as warming memories. The truth is, it wasn't just because of how Kuriko was the only child who played with him. It's because after all these years, since the very day his mother asked Kuriko to play with him, Now had feelings for her. To this day, reliving those horrible moments of abuse, the incident with that dog, were actually genuine feelings of happiness because of how much he truly liked her. Even though Now is happy that Kuriko apologized for what she did, it wasn't forgiveness that made Now seek out Kuriko, but to confess his true love for her. Which brings us back to this very moment, where Kuriko isn't just sharing a tragic story of how she once bullied and tormented a child, but ending the story with a confession. You see, since she ran into Now, she had been seeing him many times, which is why any moment now she should be meeting up with him again. It's true. For years, Kuriko did have feelings for Yutaro, but after the years of guilt, being weighed down by the memories of what she did, and to have Now free her from that inner pain when confessing his love for her, had made Kuriko doubt her decision of marrying Yutaro, and realize that it was Now who she had feelings for. Meaning that Kuriko's confession isn't just a story of a terrible moment of the past, but a detailed explanation of why she will not be marrying Yutaro because of how she had fallen deeply in love with Now. Even though it's not what you would call your ideal version of a love story, you could definitely say that both Now and Kuriko were truly a happy couple. After a private wedding under Nao's insistence, the couple have found themselves with a baby boy named Hiroshi, resulting with Kuriko believing that the rest of her life was going to be spent with a happy family. Until one day, when Nao left for work, tragedy struck, when he never returned home. And even when Kuriko had went to the police and tried everything she could to find her husband, it was hopeless. It was like Nao had just suddenly disappeared off the face of the earth. But yet, Kuriko strongly believed that one day, Nao would return. And as days turned into months, months turned into years, 4 years later, and no sign of Nao. Just a single mother who strongly believed that one day her husband will return home, and a nagging child who can't spend a single minute away from his mother's side. Every day, hearing Hiroshi crying and begging had begun to put a great deal of pressure onto Kuriko. How unbearable it was when her son would cling to her, just like his father used to do when they were children. Amazing how Hiroshi looked so much like his father, as if he was Nao's spitting image. Even though Hiroshi doesn't know anything about his father. Maybe it was because of Hiroshi's constant bickering and nagging that drove Kuriko back into the deepest part of her mind, finding a sense of comfort within the darkened place, reliving those horrible memories that had once weighed her down for so many years. Kuriko remembered how she loved tormenting Now. It was like he wanted to be bullied, even though every now and then, when Kuriko wonders about Now, what really did happen to him? More like, where he's at now. Kuriko just can't help but have the urge to bully him again. Amazing how Hiroshi looks and acts so much like his father. So that's what happened. Now didn't fall off some cliff. No, he wasn't abducted by the mafia, nor did he run off with some other woman. It's obvious that this was his idea of revenge. Did you know that Kuriko could have been happy with Yutaro, living in a better place than some condo, foolishly waiting for Nao's return? She could have lived out her life with a loving and happy family, but instead all of that went to some other woman. All thanks to Nao, the cute little brat who had once again got in the way between her and Yutaro. The crying, nagging, unbearable, clinging brat whose only talent in life is getting in the way. So Nao wants to play, and seeing how the nasty child had once again got in between her and the very thing that would have made her so happy. This time, Kuriko is going to take Nao to the playground, and she's going to find a familiar and forbidden happiness when playing with the unbearable brat who enjoys being bullied and abused. Obviously knowing that Nao would whine about it being dark outside and that mommy keeps confusing his name. Well, that just makes things much better, because this time, Kuriko isn't gonna hold back, like last time when she heard Nao's painful and traumatic screams. Because this time, she is not going to run away, nor will she regret it.